this morning at the Capitol, lawmakers in the Texas House of Representatives learned which committees they'll sit on and who will lead those committees. It's a big step forward for the chamber, which can now start hearing discussion about legislative proposals this session.
This afternoon, we are joined by two former state lawmakers. Dennis Bonnen over here by Avery is a former House Speaker who represented Southeast Texas, while Mark Strama previously served as a Democratic representative for the Austin area. Dennis and Mark, welcome back to you both. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You know, this was the day perhaps some in the House have been waiting for. I was texting with a lawmaker actually yesterday saying we are anxiously awaiting these assignments, and they came today. So what position does this put the House?
Some in the Senate have been waiting for
that too, to get to some of those priorities. But what position does this put the House in now to try and accomplish some of its policy goals?
It puts him in a phenomenal position. I think Speaker Burrows did an exceptional job assigning these committees. He listened to the members, and I think that's very clear in these assignments. The Speaker heard what members' desires were, and I want to be clear, it's the hardest thing a Speaker does. But it launches the House to go get this work done. Go to work with serious members chairing these committees, serious members diving into these issues and hearings. And so the House is now ready to get the work of the people of Texas done, and the Speaker did a good job listening to his members and putting them where they want to be effective.
I mean, I just got to look at this 30 minutes ago. I guess it was published about an hour ago.
Right.
A couple of things stood out to me. One, I noticed that the Speaker appointed two people who had also run for Speaker, David Cook and Representative Smithy, to committee chairmanships. I think that's a smart move for him to start consolidating Republican support. The other thing that stood out to me was I always look to how the Travis County delegation did. Mm-hmm. And one noteworthy thing is that we have two very strong proponents of the public education system from Travis County on the Public Education Committee, Representative Hinojosa, Representative Tallarico. I think that's really good for Austin ISD and the surrounding school districts. Representative Busey, Representative Zwiener, and Representative Cole all got vice chairmanships. They're all from the greater Austin area. Representative Howard, Donna Howard, is vice chair of higher ed and on the Approps Committee. I don't think they've assigned the article chairs.
Subcommittee chairs will come out in a week or two.
So you would think with her, she might end up in a very high position overseeing the higher education budget.
And to note for anyone who's sitting at home, appropriations really just means funding for our state agencies, how the money gets used.
Yeah, it's pretty much the most powerful committee. And then lastly, Representative Tallarico, who I've already mentioned, has 3 vice chairmanships, if I read it correctly, or 2 vice chairmanships and membership on public ed. So, you know, Travis County, I think, came out really well.
One follow-up question here. Speaker Burrows said all the House committees have Republican majorities. How notable is that?
It's not. I mean,
yep. We were
and the reason I say it's not is because
had that been made up by?
No, it's always a majority. I mean, if you have a majority of Republicans, the committees will be majority Republican committees. Now, the more notable thing is that all the committees are chaired by Republicans.
Right.
Now, that's incredibly notable because never before has it been only Republican chairs. And you know, for those who want to distort issues, they're lying. The House Republicans banned Democrat chairs. Speaker Burrows just did that today by appointing his committees with nothing but Republican chairs. That is noteworthy. Now, being a majority Republican, it is important, but it is not new. What is new and groundbreaking is only Republican chairs. That's significant. That's a major change Speaker Burrows and the House made. And of course, the committees would have the majority of the majority party.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Honestly, I never liked the idea that we would say that, like in the United States Congress, the Texas legislature is going to only allow the members of the majority party to be committee chairs. It goes against decades of history in Texas of bipartisanship. That said, I think that Speaker Burrows struck a reasonable compromise with Democrats on this, and I commend the Democrats for finding a way that they could support his speakership and extract from their support the vice chairmanship of every committee. And vice chairmanships, like the vice presidency, are kind of worth a bucket of warm spit, except that in these rules, they also got that vice chairmanship to come with a budget and with a little bit of influence over what the committee considers. So I think it's a reasonable compromise all the way around that does, at least in spirit, preserve that history of bipartisanship.
And to Mark's point about the speaker naming David Cook, I think he's a subcommittee chair, that actually was David Cook's idea. David Cook is the one who presented to the Democrats when he was running for speaker that every one of the vice chairs should be a Democrat. And I think it was wise of Speaker Burrows in the House to adopt that concept, but that was actually David Cook's offer to Democrats to get their votes when he was running for speaker.
Very interesting to see how this will all shake out, as those committees will now form and meet and schedule out their hearings to bring up those different pieces of legislation. I want to turn the page just a little bit. So Governor Greg Abbott is back in D.C. this week. We saw him meeting yesterday with President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. And what Governor Abbott would like to do is to have the federal government reimburse Texas $11 billion for all of its border security efforts. Before we talk about maybe the chances of that happening, Dennis, I wanted to bring up with you, because this is an issue that had interested you in the past and something you sought to do when you were in office.
Yeah, in 2015, I had the privilege of chairing a select committee on the issues of the border. And in that, I actually sent a bill to the federal government to reimburse Texas, just as Governor Abbott's talking about, for the cost that Texans have the burden of having an insecure border, for the federal government not meeting their federal responsibility of securing that border. That bill I sent in 2015, Governor Abbott worked with us on that. Of course, President Obama was in office. It was, to be candid, we were making a statement. We never thought that the Obama administration was going to send the check back to Texas. But I think Governor Abbott's doing the real work this time. I think it's a legitimate opportunity. I am thrilled that Governor Abbott is in Washington, D.C., doing what governors are supposed to do, which is he's advocating for his state. He's advocating for the taxpayers of his state, because he went and did the hard work to secure this border. And when he and the legislature appropriated billions upon billions of dollars because of the failure of the federal government and the Biden administration, Texans had to pay that. And I think it's right that Governor Abbott's saying, now that the Trump administration is in place, be good to Texas. We were good to America. Now be good to Texas.
I mean, look, the session launched with an announcement from the comptroller that there's tens of billions of dollars in budget surplus, but from what I see, that's going to evaporate pretty quickly when we meet some of the state's unmet needs. It'd be nothing but a bonus if we could also get $11 billion from the federal government. I don't know anybody who wouldn't support that.
What is the likelihood, though, this time around of Governor Abbott being successful in this endeavor?
I mean, it's his president. Ask him.
I would say, when you and Donald Trump were visiting, did he give you an indication?
He hasn't shared
Any
his thoughts with
insight
me
from
on
the
that.
White House from you two?
Just a clue, maybe, yeah.
I honestly think there's a fair chance. Do I think it's a high probability? No, but I think that, as someone told me once, if you never ask, you can never get the right answer. And so I think the fact that our governor is making repeated trips to Washington, D.C., making that ask, we have some Republican congressmen and women from Texas saying, we support this, we want to help make this happen. I'll put it this way. When I sent that first bill in 2015, the chance was 0. Today, there is a chance.
Can I ask you all, in the proposed budget for the state this year, we're seeing still quite a lot of money pouring down to border efforts. The governor going to ask for some money back from the feds, but we're still seeing pretty much an equal amount slated that lawmakers want to spend on the border this year. Any reaction to that? I think people may have expected that to get rolled back a bit.
I don't think you can roll it back, in a couple reasons. When I passed the first border security bill in Texas in 2015, part of that measure, and then in 2017 we went even further, part of that was giving DPS more boots on the ground, more force multipliers on that border. So the reality of it is that locked Texas into having to continue to pay for those positions. We don't want to pull those jobs back from our DPS troopers who are down there partnering with our federal partners and local partners on securing that border. So a lot of that money has to continue to be spent, because at the end of the day, the way you secure the border is the federal government is the biggest ally in getting that done, but you still need support on a state level because of what Texas has built out down there and the very prolific job Governor Abbott and the legislature have done to really do what's needed to work on that border.
Well, I'd love to spend some time dissecting that vote of no confidence in the Trump administration after
That's
listening
not what
for
it
the
is.
last 4
It's a
years
partnership.
to Dennis tell me how bad a failure the Biden administration's policy was at the border. But what I'd rather say,
The numbers prove it.
is that we are underfunding public education in the state just to get back to parity with the level of per pupil spending on an inflation adjusted basis that we had when he was speaker. we would need to be spending $4,000 more per pupil, which is more than the amount of money in the aggregate than the amount of money that we've spent on border security. So I'd rather fund public education.
I don't think it's an either or though. And that's one of the things that these pub ed guys do that I've always supported, continue to support our pub ed friends, but they like to make this an either or conversation. It is not either or. The legislature can walk and chew gum at the same time. They can fund the border, they can fund pub ed, and they are.
It's fair, but budgets are statements of priorities, and the priority ought to be public ed, and we haven't met that priority, so until we do,
when the largest budget item is education, it's hard to say it's not the priority.
$4,400 short per pupil.
Again, we will be following that vote for sure very closely. I wanted to note that Congressman Roger Williams filed a bill just this week basically putting into law, what could be law, this reimbursement by the federal government. So again, we'll have to track that for sure too. Right before we go though, we have a final few moments to talk about one more topic. Bail reform was obviously a big topic of discussion in the Texas Senate. They passed through committee today, or at least a couple days ago. What makes these proposals different from moves that we've seen in recent years, do you think?
I'm not sure they're all that different. I think that the makeup of the legislature might be different, that it creates a greater opportunity to get these bills through. And the reality of it is, I think it's also the atmosphere in the public. I think the public is tired of seeing people that shouldn't be out on the streets. They've done terrible things and they shouldn't be put out on bail, and then they do something awful yet again. I mean, I was talking to a legislator last night who said that, he wasn't sure how he would vote at this point, but he was compelled by a gentleman who approached him just yesterday, whose son had been killed outside a Houston Astros playoff game by someone who shouldn't have been out on bail. So, I mean, I think public sentiment shifts, and I think it's more powerful when you have tragic stories like that, which we need to never have those stories again. And so I think it's hard to say no to letting violent people out on bail who then go and create more heinous acts.
I agree that the politics have probably shifted on this issue, and that's probably what has shifted, not the policy. I think that the challenge will be in this political climate to make sure that we don't overreach and deny people's constitutional and civil rights. And look, the legislature is actually pretty good at this. People get frustrated with all the delays and how slow things take. And the amount of conflict, but that conflict actually often yields compromise that attempts to strike that balance.
One quick last note to Mark's really good point there. I think what a lot of Democrats who have been unsure of bail reform in the past are sitting there and looking at and thinking about, which is, could get there on bail reform because I don't want really bad people on the streets doing more bad things. But maybe we need to decriminalize, some of these lesser offenses, whether they're marijuana or those type things. So to Mark's point, I think there's probably a compromise that's in the work more than anything.
I hope that's right.
Lots to watch there. We know that out of committee and headed before a full Senate very soon, so we'll be watching that.